Sarah Martinez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she worked methodically through the rifle bay. The morning sun streamed through the high windows of the armory, casting long shadows across the rows of weapons. She had been working at the naval base for 8 months now, and this routine had become second nature to her. Clean, inspect, document, repeat. Each rifle required careful attention, and Sarah took pride in her work. The smell of gun oil and metal cleaner filled the air as she dismantled another M4 carbine. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, removing the bolt carrier group and setting each component in its designated spot on the cleaning mat. Sarah had learned to appreciate the quiet precision required for this job. Unlike her previous work in civilian life, here every detail mattered. A poorly maintained weapon could mean the difference between life and death for the sailors and SEALs who depended on them. As she worked, Sarah thought about how different her life had become since joining the base civilian workforce. Growing up in a small town in Ohio, she never imagined she would end up working with military weapons. After her divorce 2 years ago, she needed a fresh start and a stable job with good benefits. The position at the naval base had seemed like a practical choice, though she had been nervous about working around so many military personnel. The other civilian workers had warned her about the SEALs during her first week. They were different from the regular sailors, they said. More intense, more focused, and they rarely made small talk with the support staff. Sarah had seen them around the base moving with a quiet confidence that set them apart from everyone else. They seemed to exist in their own world, speaking in short phrases and communicating with looks and gestures that civilians could not understand. Sarah finished cleaning the rifle's barrel and began reassembling the weapon. Her fingers worked automatically while her mind wandered to the conversation she had overheard earlier that morning. 2 officers had been discussing an upcoming deployment, their voices tense with the weight of classified information. She had learned not to listen too closely to such conversations. Her security clearance allowed her access to the armory, but she understood the importance of staying focused on her own responsibilities. The sound of boots on concrete made her look up briefly. A group of SEALs was entering the far end of the armory for their scheduled weapons check. Sarah returned her attention to her work, knowing they would handle their business efficiently and leave without much interaction with the civilian staff. She had grown comfortable with this arrangement. The military personnel respected her work, and she respected their need for focus and professionalism. As she moved to the next rifle, Sarah reflected on how much she had learned about weapons maintenance in such a short time. Her supervisor, Tom, was a retired Marine who had taught her everything with patience and attention to detail. He often said that weapons were like any other tool. They required respect, understanding, and proper care to function reliably. Sarah had taken his lessons to heart, developing an almost meditative approach to the cleaning process. The work was physically demanding, but mentally relaxing. Each rifle presented the same challenges and required the same solutions. There was something comforting about the predictability of it all. Sarah had found peace in this routine after the chaos of her divorce and the stress of starting over in a new state. The job provided structure and purpose, 2 things she had desperately needed. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her sister back in Ohio, asking about her plans for the upcoming holidays. Sarah smiled slightly as she typed back that she would probably work through most of them. The overtime pay was good, and she was still building up her savings after the financial hit from the divorce. Besides, she genuinely enjoyed the quiet of the base during holidays when most personnel were on leave. Sarah picked up another rifle and began the familiar process of field stripping it for cleaning. This particular weapon showed signs of recent use, sand in the action and carbon buildup on the bolt. It had probably been used in training exercises the day before. She made a mental note to pay extra attention to the gas tube and chamber areas where debris often accumulated. As she worked, Sarah thought about the irony of her situation. She had always considered herself a peaceful person, someone who avoided conflict and preferred quiet solutions to problems. Yet here she was, maintaining instruments of war with the same care she once gave to tending her garden. The contradiction no longer bothered her as much as it had in the beginning. She had come to understand that her role was about ensuring the safety of the people who use these weapons, not about promoting violence. The morning progressed steadily as Sarah moved through her assigned rifles. Each weapon told a story through its wear patterns and the type of cleaning it required. Some were barely used training rifles, while others showed the signs of extensive field work. She had learned to read these signs and adjust her cleaning approach accordingly. Around mid-morning, Sarah noticed the activity in the armory beginning to increase. More personnel were arriving for weapons checks and equipment inspections. The pace of the base always picked up as the day progressed, with training exercises and administrative tasks filling the schedule. Sarah appreciated these busier periods because they made the time pass more quickly. She was reaching for her cleaning solvent when she heard footsteps approaching her workstation. Sarah assumed it was Tom coming to check on her progress, or perhaps another civilian worker needing to borrow tools. She continued working without looking up, focused on removing a particularly stubborn piece of carbon buildup from the bolt face. The footsteps stopped directly beside her workbench. Sarah sensed someone standing close but still did not look up, assuming they would speak if they needed something. The silence stretched for several seconds, unusual for the typically bustling environment of the armory. Finally, curiosity got the better of her, and she glanced up to see who was waiting. Standing beside her workbench was a SEAL she had never seen before. He was tall and lean, with the kind of weathered face that spoke of years spent in harsh conditions. His uniform was different from the others she had seen, more worn with patches and insignia that suggested extensive combat experience. What struck her most, however, was the intensity in his eyes as he looked directly at her. Without saying a word, the SEAL extended his hand toward her. In it was a rifle unlike any she had seen before. Sarah stared at the weapon in the SEAL's outstretched hand. It was clearly a sniper rifle, but unlike anything in the standard armory inventory, the metal was darker, more worn than the weapons she usually worked with. Custom modifications were visible along the barrel and stock, and the scope mounted on top looked expensive and specialized. This was not a training weapon or even a standard issue rifle. This was something personal, something that had seen real action. The SEAL continued to hold the rifle toward her, his expression unchanged. Sarah realized he was waiting for her to take it. She set down her cleaning tools and carefully accepted the weapon, surprised by its weight and balance. The rifle felt different in her hands, heavier but somehow more solid than the standard weapons she maintained. Every surface showed signs of careful use and meticulous maintenance. After handing over the rifle, the SEAL took 2 steps backward and simply stood there, watching her. He said nothing, offered no instructions or explanations. Sarah looked from the rifle to the man and back again, trying to understand what was expected of her. The silence stretched uncomfortably as other personnel moved around the armory, going about their normal business as if nothing unusual was happening. Sarah had never been in a situation like this before. In her 8 months at the base, interactions with SEALs had been minimal and strictly professional. They retrieved their assigned weapons, performed their checks, and left. They certainly never brought personal weapons to civilian staff for maintenance. She wondered if there had been some mistake, if perhaps this SEAL had confused her with someone else. Looking more closely at the rifle, Sarah began to notice details that set it apart from standard weapons. The trigger guard had been modified, and the stock showed signs of custom fitting. The barrel was free-floated, and the bipod legs were adjusted to specific settings. Someone had spent considerable time and money customizing this weapon for a particular user. The wear pattern suggested it had been fired thousands of times, each shot carefully placed and purposeful. The SEAL remained motionless, his eyes never leaving Sarah's face. She realized that speaking first might be appropriate, but she was not sure what to say. Should she ask for instructions? Should she explain that she only worked on standard-issue weapons? The man's presence was intimidating not because he seemed threatening, but because of the absolute stillness and focus he radiated. Sarah had never encountered anyone who could project such intensity through silence alone. Finally, Sarah decided to treat this like any other weapons maintenance request. She looked at the rifle again, running her eyes over the action and barrel. "I can clean this for you," she said quietly, her voice barely audible above the background noise of the armory. "But I'll need to know if there are any special procedures or requirements." The SEAL's expression did not change, but Sarah thought she detected the slightest nod. He continued to watch her in silence, apparently satisfied with her response. Sarah realized that no further communication was coming, and she would need to proceed based on her own judgment and experience. She carefully carried the rifle to her workbench and laid it on a clean section of her maintenance mat. The weapon was clearly well maintained already, but Sarah could see areas that would benefit from attention. The bolt face showed carbon residue, and there was dust in the action that suggested recent field use. She began gathering the appropriate cleaning supplies. choosing solvents and tools that would be suitable for the rifle's specialized components. As Sarah worked, she became aware that the SEAL had not moved. He remained in the same position, watching her every movement with unwavering attention. Other personnel occasionally glanced in their direction, but no one approached or seemed particularly surprised by the scene. Sarah wondered if this was something that happened regularly, if other civilian workers had similar encounters with SEALs bringing personal weapons for maintenance. The rifle's action was more complex than the standard weapons Sarah usually worked with. The trigger mechanism had been professionally modified, and the bolt required careful handling to avoid damaging the custom components. Sarah took her time, examining each part before cleaning it. She could feel the SEAL's eyes on her hands as she worked, and the pressure of his scrutiny made her extra careful with every movement. As she disassembled the rifle, Sarah noticed something that made her pause. Inside the action, etched into the metal in tiny letters, was a series of numbers and letters that looked like coordinates or mission identifiers. These markings were barely visible, and would be invisible to anyone not looking carefully. Sarah realized she was handling a weapon with a history, something that had been used in operations she could not imagine. The discovery made her hands shake slightly as she continued working. This was not just another maintenance job. This rifle represented someone's life, their survival in situations where precision and reliability were matters of life and death. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders as she cleaned each component with extra care. She glanced up briefly at the SEAL, wondering about his story and the places this rifle had been. His face revealed nothing, but Sarah noticed details about him that she had missed before. Small scars on his hands, the way he stood perfectly balanced despite appearing relaxed, and the alertness in his eyes that suggested he was constantly aware of everything happening around him. Sarah returned her attention to the rifle, working methodically through each component. The barrel required special attention, and she used a bore snake followed by careful brushing to remove all traces of residue. The scope needed delicate cleaning to avoid damaging the lenses, and Sarah used techniques Tom had taught her for handling precision optics. As she worked, Sarah found herself developing a deeper appreciation for the weapon's construction. Every modification had been made for a specific purpose, and the quality of the work was exceptional. This was not the result of casual tinkering, but of professional customization by experts who understood exactly what the user needed. The cleaning process took longer than usual, due to the rifle's complexity and Sarah's extra caution. Throughout the entire process, the SEAL never moved, never spoke, never showed any sign of impatience. His stillness was almost supernatural, and Sarah began to understand how someone could develop such focus and control. When she finally finished cleaning and began reassembling the rifle, Sarah felt a sense of accomplishment mixed with nervousness. She had never worked on such a specialized weapon, and she hoped her efforts met the standards expected by its owner. Each component fit together perfectly, the custom modifications working in harmony to create a precision instrument. As Sarah made the final adjustments and checked the rifle's function, she realized that this encounter had changed something for her. She was no longer just maintaining tools. She was caring for equipment that someone's life depended on. The responsibility felt both heavy and meaningful. Sarah completed the reassembly of the rifle and performed a final function check. The bolt cycled smoothly, the trigger broke cleanly, and all the custom components worked together perfectly. She had never felt more satisfied with a maintenance job, knowing that every detail had been attended to with the utmost care. The rifle was ready to perform exactly as its owner needed it to. She looked up at the SEAL, who had remained motionless throughout the entire process. For the first time since approaching her workbench, his expression seemed to soften slightly. Sarah carefully lifted the rifle and offered it back to him, handle first, following the safety protocols Tom had drilled into her from her first day on the job. The SEAL stepped forward and accepted the weapon with the same deliberate care Sarah had shown while cleaning it. His hands moved over the rifle briefly, checking the action and examining her work. Sarah held her breath, hoping she had met his standards. After a moment, the SEAL's eyes met hers, and she saw what might have been approval in his gaze. Without warning, the SEAL spoke for the first time. "Thank you," he said simply, his voice quiet but carrying a weight that made the two words feel significant. Then, as silently as he had arrived, he turned and walked away, carrying his rifle with him. Sarah watched him leave, feeling like she had just experienced something important but not entirely understanding what it had been. The rest of the day passed normally, but Sarah found herself thinking about the encounter repeatedly. During her lunch break, she asked Tom about protocols for maintaining personal weapons. He explained that SEALs sometimes brought specialized equipment for maintenance by qualified personnel, but it was not common. He seemed curious about why she was asking, but did not press for details when Sarah remained vague about her experience. That evening, Sarah drove home to her small apartment near the base, still thinking about the silent SEAL and his rifle. She had lived quietly since moving to the area, keeping to herself and focusing on work. Her social life was limited to occasional conversations with coworkers and weekly phone calls with her family back in Ohio. The encounter that morning had been the most intense human interaction she had experienced in months. Over the following days, Sarah found herself looking for the SEAL whenever she was in different parts of the base. She never saw him again, and she began to wonder if the encounter had been as unusual as it had seemed. Life returned to its normal routine of weapon maintenance and quiet efficiency, but something had changed in Sarah's approach to her work. She began paying more attention to the history of the weapons she maintained. Each rifle told a story through its wear patterns, the type of ammunition it had fired, and the environments it had been exposed to. Sarah started to see her job not just as technical maintenance, but as caring for tools that protected the people who carried them into dangerous situations. 2 weeks after the encounter, Sarah was working late in the armory when Tom approached her workstation. He had a serious expression on his face, and Sarah wondered if she had done something wrong. Instead, Tom handed her a folded piece of paper and said that someone had requested her specifically for a special maintenance job the following morning. Sarah unfolded the paper and found a simple message, written in precise handwriting: 800 hours. Building 17. Bring specialized cleaning kit. There was no signature, but Sarah somehow knew who had written the note. Building 17 was across the base from the main armory, in an area she had never visited. She had heard other workers mention it in passing, always in hushed tones, as a place where special operations personnel conducted training and planning. That night, Sarah had trouble sleeping. She kept wondering what kind of maintenance work required her to travel to a different building, and why she had been specifically requested. Part of her was nervous about venturing into unfamiliar territory on the base, while another part was excited about the possibility of doing more specialized work. The next morning, Sarah gathered her most comprehensive cleaning kit and made her way to Building 17. The structure was nondescript from the outside, but she noticed increased security measures and personnel who carried themselves with the same quiet intensity she had observed in the SEAL who had brought her his rifle. At the entrance, a guard checked her identification and the maintenance request before directing her to a specific room number. Sarah found herself in a corridor lined with doors marked only with numbers. The atmosphere was different from the main armory, more serious, more focused. She could hear muffled conversations and equipment being moved, but she could not make out specific words or activities. When she reached the designated room, Sarah knocked quietly and waited. The door opened to reveal the same SEAL who had approached her workbench 2 weeks earlier. He nodded once in recognition and stepped aside to allow her entry. The room was larger than Sarah had expected, with multiple workbenches and equipment racks. Several other SEALs were present, all working with weapons and gear she had never seen before. The SEAL who had brought her there led Sarah to a specific workbench, where 3 rifles were laid out. These weapons were even more specialized than the first one she had worked on, with modifications that seemed almost futuristic. Each rifle was accompanied by a folder containing specific maintenance instructions and procedures that went far beyond anything Sarah had learned in her standard training. As Sarah examined the weapons and instructions, she realized she was looking at equipment used for missions that required absolute precision and reliability. These were not training weapons or even standard-issue equipment. These rifles were tools for operations where failure was not an option, where lives depended on every component functioning perfectly under extreme conditions. The SEAL handed Sarah a new set of cleaning supplies, tools she had never seen before designed specifically for maintaining these specialized weapons. He spoke briefly, explaining that the rifles had been used in recent training exercises that simulated desert conditions. and they required maintenance beyond what standard procedures could provide. Sarah began working on the first rifle, applying the specialized procedures outlined in the folder. The work was more complex than anything she had done before, requiring techniques and tools she was learning as she went. The SEAL watched her work initially, then moved to assist other team members with their equipment while staying close enough to answer questions if needed. As Sarah worked, she became aware that she was participating in something larger than routine maintenance. The other personnel in the room moved with purpose and urgency that suggested upcoming operations or deployments. Conversations were conducted in low voices using terminology she did not recognize, but the tone conveyed the seriousness of whatever they were preparing for. The first rifle took Sarah nearly 2 hours to complete properly, but when she finished, she knew the work was exceptional. Every component was perfectly clean, properly lubricated, and functioning exactly as designed. She moved to the second rifle, finding the work slightly easier now that she better understood the procedures and tools. By the time Sarah finished maintaining all 3 rifles, the sun was setting outside Building 17. She had spent nearly 10 hours working with an intensity and focus she had never experienced before. Every component had been cleaned, inspected, and tested according to the specialized procedures. The weapons were now ready for whatever mission awaited their users. The SEAL who had brought her there inspected each rifle carefully, checking her work with the thoroughness of someone whose life might depend on these weapons functioning perfectly. After examining the third rifle, he looked at Sarah with what she was beginning to recognize as his version of approval. "Good work," he said quietly, and Sarah felt a surge of pride unlike anything she had experienced in her previous jobs. As Sarah packed her tools, the SEAL approached her with another folded paper. This one contained a different kind of message. Not just a maintenance request, but what appeared to be a schedule. Over the next several weeks, she would be working with specialized weapons for this team on a regular basis. Sarah realized that her role on the base was about to change significantly. The drive home that evening gave Sarah time to think about what had happened. She had been selected for work that required security clearances and specialized skills that most civilian personnel never accessed. The responsibility was both exciting and intimidating. She thought about her quiet life since the divorce, how she had focused on rebuilding her stability and confidence. This opportunity represented something she had not expected, a chance to contribute to something meaningful and challenging. Over the following weeks, Sarah's routine changed dramatically. She continued her regular maintenance duties in the main armory, but several days each week were now spent in Building 17, working with the Special Operations team. The work was always different, always challenging, and always carried an urgency that reminded her of the serious nature of what these weapons were used for. The team members gradually began to acknowledge her presence with nods and occasional brief conversations. Sarah learned that they were part of an elite unit that conducted missions around the world in conditions that demanded absolute reliability from their equipment. The weapons she maintained were their lifelines in situations where mechanical failure could mean death. Sarah also learned that the SEAL who had first approached her was known by his team members as Rodriguez. He was apparently the team's lead sniper and weapons specialist, responsible for ensuring that all precision equipment met the exacting standards required for their missions. His decision to bring his personal rifle to Sarah for maintenance had been a test, and her performance had led to her selection for the specialized work. As weeks turned into months, Sarah found herself becoming an integral part of the team's preparation process. She learned to recognize the signs that indicated upcoming deployments, increased activity, longer hours, and a particular intensity in how the team members prepared their equipment. During these periods, her work became even more critical, as she was often the last person to handle their weapons before they departed for unknown missions. The relationship between Sarah and the team members evolved slowly. While they remained professional and focused, she began to see glimpses of their personalities during quiet moments. Rodriguez, despite his intimidating exterior, showed patience when teaching her new procedures and appreciation for her careful work. Other team members occasionally shared stories about places they had been, though always in vague terms that respected operational security. Sarah's skills continued to develop as she worked with increasingly sophisticated equipment. She learned to maintain night vision devices, specialized communications equipment, and weapon systems that pushed the boundaries of current technology. Each new challenge built her confidence and expertise, transforming her from a basic weapons maintenance technician into a specialist trusted with the most critical equipment. One evening, while working late in Building 17, Sarah overheard a conversation that made her understand the real impact of her work. Two team members were discussing a recent mission where Rodriguez had made a critical shot that saved the lives of captured civilians. The success of that shot had depended on his rifle functioning perfectly under extreme conditions, and Sarah realized that her maintenance work had played a small but vital role in that successful outcome. The knowledge that her work directly contributed to saving lives changed Sarah's perspective on everything she did. Every component she cleaned, every adjustment she made, every function check she performed could mean the difference between mission success and failure, between life and death for people she would never meet. The responsibility was overwhelming at times, but it also gave her work a meaning and purpose she had never experienced before. As Sarah's expertise grew, she began to notice things about the weapons that even experienced operators sometimes missed. Her detailed knowledge of each rifle's history and characteristics allowed her to spot potential problems before they became critical issues. The team members started coming to her not just for maintenance, but for advice about equipment modifications and performance optimization. Rodriguez began bringing Sarah into planning discussions where her technical knowledge could inform mission preparation. She learned to balance the need for maximum performance with the practical requirements of different operational environments. Her recommendations influenced equipment selection and helped ensure that each team member carried weapons optimized for their specific role and mission requirements. The trust the team placed in Sarah's expertise was both flattering and humbling. These were people who risked their lives regularly, and they were willing to depend on her judgment regarding equipment that could determine their survival. Sarah felt the weight of this responsibility every day, but she also felt more fulfilled in her work than she had ever thought possible. During quiet periods between deployments, Sarah sometimes found herself in conversations with team members about their experiences and perspectives. She learned about the mental challenges of their work, the importance of trust within the team, and the ways they coped with the stress of constant danger. These conversations helped her understand the human side of the warriors whose equipment she maintained. One afternoon, while Sarah was working on a particularly complex rifle modification, Rodriguez approached her workbench with a serious expression. He stood silently for a moment, as had become his habit when he needed to discuss something important. Sarah finished the adjustment she was making and looked up, waiting for him to speak. "We're going out again soon," Rodriguez said quietly. "This one's different. Higher stakes, more complex environment. I need to know that everything we're carrying will perform perfectly, no matter what we encounter out there." Sarah nodded, understanding that this was both a briefing and a request for reassurance. "Everything will be ready," she replied with confidence that had grown from months of successful preparation. "What kind of environmental challenges should I prepare for?" Rodriguez provided details about temperature extremes, humidity, and sand conditions that would test every component of their equipment. Sarah made notes about specific procedures and modifications that would be necessary to ensure optimal performance under those conditions. As they discussed technical requirements, Sarah realized that she had become more than just a maintenance technician. She was now a crucial member of the team's support structure. The preparation for the upcoming mission consumed Sarah's attention completely for the next 2 weeks. Every weapon required specialized modifications to handle the extreme environmental conditions Rodriguez had described. She worked longer hours than ever before, sometimes staying in Building 17 until well after midnight to ensure every detail was perfect. During this intense preparation period, Sarah gained new insights into the team's dynamics and the pressure they faced. She observed how each member dealt with pre-mission stress differently. Some became more focused and quiet, while others used humor to maintain morale. Rodriguez remained consistent in his calm intensity, but Sarah noticed subtle signs of the weight he carried as the team's senior member. The weapons modifications required techniques Sarah had never attempted before. She worked closely with Rodriguez to develop procedures for protecting sensitive components from sand infiltration, while maintaining quick access for field maintenance. Together they created custom protective covers and modified cleaning procedures that could be performed in harsh field conditions with limited resources. Sarah also prepared specialized maintenance kits that each team member would carry with them. These compact packages contained everything necessary for basic weapon maintenance in the field, customized for each person's specific equipment. She spent hours testing different combinations of tools and supplies to find the optimal balance between capability and weight. As the departure date approached, Sarah found herself working alongside the team members as they conducted final equipment checks. The atmosphere in Building 17 became increasingly focused, with conversations limited to essential mission-related topics. Sarah felt the tension building and understood that she was witnessing the transformation of a group of individuals into a precisely coordinated operational unit. 2 days before departure, Rodriguez asked Sarah to accompany the team to an off-base training facility for final equipment testing. This was the first time she had been invited to observe the team actually using the weapons she maintained. The training facility was located in a desert environment that closely simulated the conditions they would face on their mission. Watching the team operate their weapons in realistic conditions was a revelation for Sarah. She finally saw how her meticulous maintenance work translated into operational performance. The rifles functioned flawlessly despite being subjected to conditions that would have caused problems for standard equipment. Sand, heat, and rapid temperature changes that might have caused jams or accuracy problems had no effect on the specially prepared weapons. During the training exercise, Sarah observed from a safe distance while monitoring radio communications between team members. She heard Rodriguez coordinating precision shots at extreme ranges, his voice calm and professional even under simulated stress. The confidence in his voice told her that he trusted his equipment completely, and she felt proud knowing that her work contributed to that confidence. After the training exercise, the team conducted a thorough inspection of all equipment. Sarah assisted with this process, checking for any signs of wear or problems that might need attention before the actual mission. A few minor adjustments were needed, but overall the weapons had performed exactly as designed. The team members expressed satisfaction with their equipment's performance, and Sarah felt validated in her preparation efforts. The night before the team's departure, Sarah worked late in Building 17 performing final checks on all equipment. The building was quieter than usual, with most personnel having completed their preparations. Rodriguez appeared at her workbench around midnight, carrying his personal sniper rifle for one last inspection. As Sarah examined the rifle under bright lights, Rodriguez spoke more openly than he had before about the upcoming mission. While he could not reveal specific details, he explained that the team would be operating in a hostile environment where their equipment would be tested to its absolute limits. Success would depend on everything functioning perfectly when lives were on the line. Sarah completed her inspection and pronounced the rifle ready for deployment. Rodriguez accepted the weapon and stood silently for a moment, as was his habit when preparing to say something important. "I want you to know," he said finally, "that your work has made a difference. The confidence we have in our equipment translates directly into mission effectiveness. That matters more than you might realize." The simple acknowledgement meant more to Sarah than any formal recognition could have. She had found her purpose in supporting people who put their lives at risk to protect others. The work was demanding and sometimes stressful, but it provided a sense of meaning that had been missing from her life since her divorce and career change. The next morning, Sarah arrived at Building 17 early to see the team off. The atmosphere was businesslike and efficient, as final equipment was loaded and last-minute briefings were conducted. She watched as each team member checked their weapons one final time, following procedures she had helped develop and using equipment she had prepared with painstaking care. Rodriguez approached Sarah as the team prepared to leave. He handed her a sealed envelope and said it contained instructions for equipment maintenance procedures to be implemented while they were away. Sarah understood that this was more than just technical guidance. It was a way of keeping her connected to the team's mission, even while they were deployed. As the team departed, Sarah felt a mixture of pride and anxiety. She was proud of the work she had done to prepare them for success, but she was also aware that the next time she saw these weapons, they would likely show evidence of having been used in combat. The thought of her carefully maintained equipment being subjected to the stress and violence of real operations was both thrilling and sobering. Over the following weeks, Sarah maintained her regular duties in the main armory, while thinking frequently about the deployed team. She had no information about their mission or location, but she found herself paying closer attention to news reports from around the world. wondering if any of the events she read about might involve the people whose equipment she had prepared. During this period, Sarah received recognition from her supervisors for the specialized work she had been doing. Tom recommended her for advanced training courses that would further develop her expertise with sophisticated weapon systems. The base commander commended her for the professional excellence she had demonstrated in supporting special operations personnel. The recognition was gratifying, but Sarah's primary focus remained on preparing for the team's return. She studied the technical manuals Rodriguez had left with her, learning new maintenance procedures and preparing for equipment modifications that might be needed, based on lessons learned during the deployment. 3 weeks after the team's departure, Sarah received word that they would be returning soon. She began preparing Building 17 for their arrival, setting up workstations and gathering supplies for the comprehensive equipment maintenance that would be required after field operations. She knew that the weapons would need careful attention to remove the effects of combat use and restore them to peak operating condition. The anticipation of the team's return brought back memories of the first time Rodriguez had approached her workbench with his rifle. That encounter had changed her life in ways she could never have imagined, transforming her from a routine maintenance worker into a specialist trusted with the most critical equipment used by elite warriors. As she prepared for their return, Sarah reflected on how much she had grown both professionally and personally through this experience. The team returned on a gray morning 3.5 weeks after their departure. Sarah was waiting in Building 17 when they arrived, having prepared comprehensive maintenance stations for each team member's equipment. The men who entered the building looked different from those who had left, tired, weathered, but carrying themselves with the quiet satisfaction of a successful mission. Rodriguez was the last to enter, carrying his sniper rifle in the same careful manner Sarah had come to associate with him. Their eyes met across the room, and she saw something in his expression that told her the mission had been successful, but challenging. He approached her workstation with the familiar, deliberate pace, but this time his rifle showed obvious signs of hard use. The weapon that Rodriguez placed on Sarah's workbench was the same rifle she had maintained so carefully before his departure, but it now bore the unmistakable marks of combat operations. Sand was embedded in every crevice, the finish was worn in places from handling under stress, and the action showed signs of heavy use. Despite this, Sarah could see that the rifle had performed exactly as designed throughout whatever challenges it had faced. As Sarah began her initial inspection of the rifle, Rodriguez provided a brief summary of the conditions the weapon had endured. Extreme temperature variations, persistent sand infiltration, high humidity, and multiple precision shots at maximum range had tested every component. Yet the rifle had functioned flawlessly throughout the mission, contributing to an outcome that had saved lives and achieved critical objectives. The other team members brought their weapons to Sarah's area as well, each rifle telling a story of successful performance under adverse conditions. Sarah felt a deep sense of satisfaction seeing that her preparation work had enabled these weapons to perform when it mattered most. The trust the team had placed in her expertise had been justified through the ultimate test of combat operations. Over the next several hours, Sarah worked systematically through each weapon, documenting the wear patterns and operational effects she observed. This information would be valuable for improving future preparation procedures and understanding how different environmental factors affected weapon performance. Each rifle required extensive cleaning and component replacement, but the fundamental systems had remained intact throughout the mission. Rodriguez remained near Sarah's workstation while she worked on his rifle, occasionally providing details about specific challenges the weapon had faced. He explained how the custom modifications she had developed had prevented sand infiltration that would have disabled a standard rifle. The specialized lubricants and protective treatments had maintained smooth operation, even when the weapon was exposed to extreme temperature variations. As Sarah disassembled Rodriguez's rifle for thorough cleaning, she discovered something that made her pause. Etched into the bolt face, barely visible among the existing markings, were new symbols that had not been there before deployment. When she asked Rodriguez about them, he explained quietly that they represented successful mission outcomes, a tradition among snipers to mark their weapons after operations that saved lives. The revelation that Rodriguez's rifle had been used to save lives during the recent mission filled Sarah with a profound sense of purpose. Her careful maintenance work had contributed directly to protecting innocent people in a dangerous situation. The technical skills she had developed and the attention to detail she brought to her work had real-world consequences that extended far beyond the walls of Building 17. Over the following days, Sarah completed the post-mission maintenance on all the team's weapons. Each rifle was restored to peak operating condition, with worn components replaced and all systems tested thoroughly. The process gave her insights into how the weapons had performed and what modifications might be beneficial for future operations. During this period, Sarah noticed changes in how the team members interacted with her. The successful mission had strengthened their confidence in her abilities, and they began seeking her input on equipment decisions that went beyond basic maintenance. Rodriguez started including her in discussions about potential weapon modifications and upgrades that could improve mission effectiveness. One afternoon, while Sarah was completing final adjustments on a newly modified rifle, Rodriguez approached her with a folder containing official documents. Inside was a commendation letter recognizing her contributions to mission success, along with an offer for advanced security clearance that would allow her to work on even more specialized projects. The recognition represented validation of the professional growth she had achieved since that first silent encounter months earlier. Sarah accepted the advanced clearance and the additional responsibilities that came with it. Over the following months, her role continued to evolve as she became involved in equipment development projects and training programs for other support personnel. The expertise she had gained working with Rodriguez's team made her a valuable resource for improving weapons maintenance procedures across the base. The relationship between Sarah and the team settled into a comfortable pattern of mutual respect and professional collaboration. She had become an integral part of their operational preparation process, and they had become the most meaningful aspect of her work life. The trust and camaraderie that developed between them filled a void that had existed in Sarah's life since her divorce and career change. As time passed, Sarah reflected on how dramatically her life had changed since that morning when Rodriguez first approached her workbench. What had begun as a routine job maintaining standard weapons had evolved into specialized work that contributed directly to protecting lives and achieving critical objectives. The technical skills she had developed were valuable, but more importantly, she had found a sense of purpose and belonging that had been missing from her life. The silent encounter that had started everything continued to influence how Sarah approached her work. Rodriguez's decision to trust her with his personal weapon, despite having no prior knowledge of her abilities, had taught her about the importance of taking calculated risks and recognizing potential in unexpected places. The lesson had applications beyond weapons maintenance, affecting how she approached relationships and opportunities in all areas of her life. Rodriguez occasionally brought new team members to meet Sarah when they joined the unit, always introducing her as someone whose expertise was essential to mission success. These introductions had become a form of recognition that Sarah treasured, representing acceptance into a community of professionals who understood the importance of excellence in everything they did. The work remained challenging and demanding, with each new mission bringing different requirements and technical obstacles to overcome. Sarah continued to develop her skills and knowledge, staying current with advances in weapons technology and maintenance procedures. The learning process kept her engaged and motivated, providing constant opportunities for professional growth. Sarah's personal life had also benefited from the confidence and sense of purpose she had gained through her work. She had developed friendships with other specialized personnel on the base and had begun dating someone who understood and respected the importance of her job. The stability and meaning she had found in her work had provided a foundation for rebuilding other aspects of her life. Looking back on that first encounter with Rodriguez, Sarah understood that it had been a turning point that changed the trajectory of her entire life. The silent trust he had shown by placing his weapon in her hands had opened doors to opportunities and experiences she could never have imagined. The responsibility had been overwhelming at times, but it had also provided rewards that went far beyond professional recognition. As Sarah prepared for another day of maintaining the weapons that protected those who protected others, she felt grateful for the path that had led her to this meaningful work. The quiet precision required for proper weapons maintenance had taught her patience and attention to detail that benefited every aspect of her life. Most importantly, she had learned that purpose and fulfillment could be found in unexpected places, sometimes beginning with nothing more than a silent gesture of trust between strangers.